The screech of tires, a deafening thud, a single yelp cut short. Ethan froze, his grip tightening on the worn leather harness in his hand. The world around him had already been darkness, but now it felt empty. Too quiet, too wrong. Max? His voice cracked. He reached out, his fingers grasping at nothing but air. Then chaos. A car door slammed. Footsteps rushed toward him, gasps from strangers. Someone cursed under their breath. A woman stifled a sob. Ethan took a step forward, but a firm hand landed on his shoulder. "Sir, wait, please don't move." He didn't need to see. He already knew. His guide dog, his lifeline, had thrown himself into the path of an oncoming car, and now he wasn't moving. Ethan's chest heaved. His world had already been stolen once, the day he lost his sight. But this felt worse. Max wasn't just a dog. He was everything. His guardian, his best friend, his only family. And now he was... No, Ethan dropped to his knees, hands trembling as he reached out. Fur, soft, warm, still there. A weak, shuddering breath. He's alive. But why had Max done it? And then a voice broke through the noise. "Oh my God," someone whispered. He saved that little girl." Ethan's stomach clenched. What girl? He strained to listen, piecing together the frantic murmurs around him. A mother sobbing. A child's hiccuping cries. A man shouting for an ambulance. Then the words that shattered him. He saw it coming. He knew. And he jumped in front of her. Ethan's heart pounded. His fingers dug into Max's fur. The dog who had guided him through life had made one final choice. Not to save his blind owner, but to save someone else. And Ethan had no idea why. Ethan had never believed in second chances. Life had already stolen too much from him. Losing his sight at 21 had been a death sentence to the life he once knew. One moment, he was a young man with dreams of becoming a photographer. His entire future stretched before him like an open road. The next, darkness swallowed everything. It had been a freak accident, a drunk driver, a crash that should have taken his life, but instead took his vision. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive, but what kind of life was this? Stumbling through an endless void, depending on others for even the smallest tasks. At first, Ethan refused to leave his apartment. Every step felt like walking on the edge of a cliff, never knowing if or when he'd fall. Friends drifted away. Family tried to help, but he hated the pity in their voices. Then came Max. The day they met, Ethan hadn't wanted a guide dog. The idea of depending on an animal, of forming an attachment, felt like another trap. Another heartbreak waiting to happen. But Max had been different. He wasn't just trained to lead. He understood Ethan in a way no one else did. When the world became too loud, Max would press his body against Ethan's leg, grounding him. When the nightmares came, Max would nuzzle into his hand, steadying his breathing. He wasn't just a guide dog. He was his anchor, his family. And over time, Max taught Ethan how to live again. To trust, to walk without fear, to laugh. It wasn't just about navigating sidewalks and street crossings. It was about navigating life. And now, here he was, lying motionless on the pavement, fighting for every breath. Ethan's fingers curled into Max's fur, his throat burning. His best friend, his lifeline, had nearly died. But not for him, for someone else. A little girl. A child he didn't even know. Why? What had Max seen that Ethan couldn't, and worse, what if Ethan had never truly known Max at all? Ethan sat beside Max in the emergency vet clinic, his hands wrapped around the dog's paw as if holding on would keep him here, keep him safe. Every few seconds his fingers twitched, waiting for movement, for a sign of life. The vet had taken Max in for x-rays and scans. Ethan had refused to leave. He didn't care about the quiet murmurs around him, the sympathetic voices of the staff. All he cared about was the steady rise and fall of Max's chest beneath his palm. His mind replayed the accident over and over. The car, the little girl's cry, the sickening impact of Max's body hitting the pavement. Why had he done it? Dogs were trained to protect their owners. Guide dogs were taught not to react to distractions, to prioritize their handler's safety above all else. But Max had broken that rule, and it wasn't the first time. Ethan's grip tightened. There had been moments before, small, almost unnoticeable, where Max had acted strangely. The way he hesitated at crosswalks even when the signal was safe. The times he nudged Ethan in a different direction, away from a group of people. The night he growled at something unseen in their apartment hallway. Ethan had brushed it off as nothing, but now a sick feeling twisted in his gut. What if Max had been trying to tell him something all along? What if Ethan had been blind to more than just the world around him? Hours passed. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and worry. Finally, footsteps approached. Ethan turned toward the sound, his body stiffening. Dr. Patel, the veterinarian, cleared her throat softly. Max is stable. He has some bruised ribs and a dislocated shoulder, but there's no internal bleeding. He's lucky. Ethan exhaled, his fingers curling against his palm. Can I see him? There was a pause. Ethan, she said gently, we need to talk about something else first. His stomach clenched. What? She hesitated. You said Max jumped in front of the car. But acting, that's not normal for a guide dog. Ethan's jaw tightened. I know. We ran some additional tests while he was under sedation. A pause. Then softly, Max has a tumor. The world dropped out from under him. What? His voice was barely a whisper. It's in his brain, it's small, but it's pressing on a critical part that affects perception and instincts. Ethan shook his head, a cold numbness creeping into his limbs. No, Max is fine. He's still strong. He's been compensating, she said. Dogs are resilient, Ethan. They don't show pain the way we do, but this tumor, it's likely causing disorientation, affecting his decision-making. Ethan swallowed hard. You're saying he didn't know what he was doing? Dr. Patel hesitated. I don't think it's that simple. A pause, then carefully. Tell me, has he been acting differently lately? Ethan clenched his jaw. Yes, the hesitant way Max had been guiding him, the unease, the protective instincts stronger than ever. The sense that Max had been seeing something Ethan couldn't. Dr. Patel sighed. It's possible he wasn't just confused, Ethan. It's possible he saw something you didn't, that he knew something was wrong. Ethan's heart pounded. Like what? She hesitated again. That's what you need to figure out. Ethan brought Max home that night, his mind a storm of questions. Max was groggy from the pain meds, his body heavy against Ethan's leg. But as soon as they stepped into the apartment, something changed. A low growl rumbled in Max's throat. Ethan stiffened. What is it, buddy? Max shifted, pressing against him. His muscles tensed, his ears perked. Ethan swallowed. The apartment was silent. Nothing seemed different. But Max knew. And now Ethan had no doubt. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a long time, and he had been blind to it. For the next few days, Ethan convinced himself that everything was fine. Max was healing. The vet had prescribed medication and rest, and though he moved slower, he was still the same loyal, attentive companion Ethan had always known. The tumor. Ethan refused to think about it. Denial was easier. Besides, wasn't it possible Max had just been acting on instinct? A good dog doing a good thing? Maybe Ethan had been overthinking it, letting his blindness fuel paranoia, so he forced himself back into routine. Morning walks. Coffee at the corner cafe. Navigating the city with Max at his side, even as guilt gnawed at the edges of his mind. Until the night everything changed. It started with the phone call. Ethan had just settled onto the couch, Max curled up at his feet. The hum of the city buzzed outside, distant and familiar. Then his phone vibrated. He frowned. It was late. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something in his gut told him to answer. Hello? Silence. Then a breath. A soft, shaky inhale. On the other end, Ethan, a voice whispered. Every hair on his body stood on end. It was a woman's voice, young, fragile, and terrified. Who is this? He demanded, a pause. Then, barely above a whisper, You don't know me, but your dog saved my daughter. Ethan's breath caught. The accident. The little girl. He gripped the phone tighter. Is she okay? A choked sob. Yes, because of Max. Relief flooded him. But then the woman's voice turned urgent. Ethan, you're in danger. His heart stopped. What? I don't know how to explain this, she stammered. But Max, he didn't just save my daughter from a car. He saved her from him. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Him? He repeated. The woman's voice trembled. The man driving that car, it wasn't an accident. He wasn't aiming for her, he was aiming for you. The line went dead, and behind him, Max growled. Low. Deep. Warning. Ethan turned toward the door, his pulse hammering. Someone was outside. Ethan's breath came in short, shallow gasps. The woman's words echoed in his head. He was aiming for you. Outside. His door, the hallway, was silent, but Max's growl hadn't stopped. It rumbled in his chest, steady and dangerous. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. Ethan gripped Max's harness, his mind racing. He couldn't see. He had no way of knowing what was coming. For the first time in years, he felt truly helpless. Then, a sound. Soft, almost imperceptible. The click of a lock being tested. Ethan's stomach twisted. His apartment door was locked, but that sound, someone was checking, seeing if it would open. Max tensed. Ethan backed away, his fingers tightening in Max's fur. He fumbled for his phone, heart pounding, but his hands were shaking too much. The device slipped from his grasp, landing with a thud on the floor. He dropped to his knees, reaching for it blindly. A shadow passed under the door, a sharp inhale on the other side. Then, nothing. Silence. The presence was gone, or at least, it had disappeared from the hallway. Ethan's chest heaved. He pressed a trembling hand to Max's side, grounding himself in the warmth of his dog's fur. But the fear didn't leave. The woman had been right. Someone had tried to kill him, and now they knew where he lived. Ethan swallowed hard. For the first time in years, he felt like that broken, scared man trapped in the darkness, lost alone. Max nudged him, his big head pressing against Ethan's chest. His breathing was labored, but his presence was steady, strong, and in that moment Ethan realized something. Max had known all along, not just about the accident, not just about the danger, about him, the person hunting Ethan. The tumor hadn't made Max confused. It had made him hyper-aware. He'd been trying to protect Ethan for weeks, guiding him away from unseen threats, warning him, and Ethan had ignored it. Until now. Ethan clenched his jaw. Fear coiled inside him. But something else burned hotter. Resolve. He wasn't helpless. He wasn't alone. Max had saved his life. Now it was Ethan's turn to fight back. Ethan forced his breathing to slow. Panic wouldn't help him now. Max was still pressed against his side, his body tense, his ears flicking toward. Every tiny sound, the man outside was gone. For now. But he'd be back. And Ethan needed answers. His fingers curled around his phone. He redialed the unknown number, the woman who had warned him. It rang twice before she answered. Hello? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan's pulse pounded. Tell me everything now. A shaky breath. I didn't know who else to call, she said. The man in the car, I know him. He's my ex-husband. Ethan gritted his teeth. Why was he after me? She hesitated. Then, because you saw something you weren't supposed to. Ethan's stomach twisted. That's impossible. He was blind. I don't mean you, she said. I mean Max. A sharp chill ran through him. Max. His dog had sensed something, seen something. And he had reacted the only way he knew how, by leading Ethan away, by growling at unseen threats, by throwing himself in front of that car to stop a killer. Ethan felt sick. Max hadn't been acting strangely because of the tumor. He had been trying to protect Ethan from a threat that no one else had noticed. What did Max see? Ethan asked. The woman's voice shook. My ex, he's not just some angry man. He's dangerous. I left him because of what he did. He hurt people, and I think he followed you before the accident. Maybe Max picked up his scent. Maybe he recognized his voice. But whatever it was, Max knew. He knew who he was. Ethan swallowed hard, and suddenly everything made sense. The hesitation at crosswalks, the unease in their apartment hallway, the way Max had pulled him away from certain places, certain people. Max had been tracking a predator, and Ethan had ignored. The signs. A lump formed in his throat. Where is he now? A beat of silence. Then, he's watching you. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. I tried to warn you, she whispered. But it's too late. He won't stop now. A creak outside the apartment. Ethan's grip tightened on Max's harness. He wasn't just fighting for his own life anymore. He was fighting for the dog who had given everything to protect him, and this time, he wouldn't be blind to the truth. Ethan didn't move. Max was rigid beside him, his body a tense wall of muscle and instinct. His growl was low, steady, no longer just a warning but a promise. Outside the apartment, silence. But Ethan felt him. The man was still there, watching, waiting. Ethan's fingers curled into Max's fur. No more running. He reached for the closest thing he could use as a weapon, his cane, lightweight. Not much, but it was something. Then a sound. Not from the hallway, from inside. A whisper of movement. So a shift in the air. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He's already inside. The realization hit him a second too late. Max lunged. A snarl. A crash. The sound of a struggle. Max's body colliding with something, someone. A man's sharp curse. Ethan swung wildly with his cane, his heart hammering, but it hit nothing but air. Then, a hand. Cold fingers grabbed his wrist. A voice hissed in his ear. You should have stayed blind. Then, blackness. Pain. That was the first thing Ethan registered. A throbbing ache in his skull. The taste of blood in his mouth. His body felt heavy, sluggish. Where was he? His ears rang. His mind swam through a haze of confusion until he heard it. A growl, low, weak, but still fighting. Max. Ethan's heart clenched. He forced himself to focus. He was lying on the floor. His wrist ached where the man had grabbed him. The air smelled sharp, metallic. Blood. Max's blood. No. No. Ethan struggled to sit up, his hands fumbling across the floor. Max, he croaked, a soft whimper. Then, a shuffle of movement. The man. Ethan forced himself to listen. Footsteps. Unsteady breathing. The man was still here, moving closer. I should have done this the first time, the man muttered. Would have saved me a lot of trouble. Ethan clenched his fists. He had spent his whole life depending on others, letting them tell him what he couldn't do, but Max had never doubted him. Max had trusted him, and now Ethan would trust himself. He didn't think. He acted. Gripping his cane like a weapon, he swung blindly toward the sound of breathing. Crack. Solid hit. The man grunted in pain, stumbling back. Max seized the opening. Despite his injuries, the dog lunged, a vicious snarl, the sound of a struggle, scraping, gasping. Then, a crash. Silence. Ethan's chest heaved. He reached out desperately, his hands finding Max's trembling body. Warm, alive. Sirens wailed in the distance. The woman. She must have called the police. Ethan let out a shaky breath, pressing his forehead to Max's. You held on, he whispered. You saved me. Max let out a tired huff, nudging Ethan's hand with his nose. Even now, even after everything, his dog was still guiding him, still leading him home. Months later, the nightmares lingered. The fear never fully disappeared. But Ethan was healing. Max, too, the vet said the tumor would eventually take him. Maybe months, maybe a year. But for now, Max still walked by Ethan's side. Slower, a little weaker, but just as strong in spirit. And Ethan had made a promise. Max had spent his life protecting him. Now, Ethan would spend the rest of Max's life making sure. He knew he was more than just a guide dog. He was family. As they walked through the city, the sun warm on their backs, Ethan whispered, You see things I don't, buddy. Max wagged his tail, and for once, Ethan didn't feel blind at all.